Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Glory Edim and Natalie Moore. Thanks for joining us. FAN's YouTube channel has an archive of over 350 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for some introductions. Gloria Edim. I'm so sorry. It must just be Friday night. I apologize. Glory Edim is a literary tastemaker, entrepreneur, and advocate for diverse voices in literature. In 2015, she founded Well Read Black Girl, an online platform and book club dedicated to celebrating the works of Black women authors and creating a supportive online community for readers. Under her leadership, Well Read Black Girl has grown into a nonprofit organization hosting events, book festivals, and author conversations that highlight the richness and diversity of Black literature. Her efforts have earned her accolades such as the 2017 Innovators Award from the Los Angeles Times and the Madam C.J. Walker Award from the Hurston Wright Foundation. Joining her is one of our favorite people, Natalie Moore, an award-winning journalist and author and senior lecturer and director of audio programming at the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. Her enterprise reporting has tackled race, housing, economic development, food injustice, and violence, and her work has been broadcast on the BBC, Marketplace, and NPR's Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Weekend Edition. She is the author of The Billboard, a play about abortion, and The South Side, a portrait of Chicago and American segregation. Natalie has interviewed several fan guests for our events, including Ta-Nehisi Coates, Jesmyn Ward, Austin Channing Brown, Christian Cooper, Thomas Fisher, and Aisha Rasco. Now let's welcome Glory Edim and Natalie Moore to FAN.
Thank you, Lonnie. Hi, Glory.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Well, happy book launch week.
Thank you, thank you. It's still I'm still taking it all in.
Well, how's it been going so far?
So far, so good. We had a beautiful opening day in New York, and then I had another launch in DC where I'm from. So it was nice to have my friends and family all there. And now I'm having this conversation with you. So I feel like I've just been going from like warm hand to warm hand. It's been feeling really edifying.
Well, I wore my Howard sweatshirt in your honor. We were not there at the same time, but go Bison.
Yes, always. HU. We just celebrated our 100th anniversary of our homecoming. It
Yes,
was, were you able to come down for
I was
homecoming?
there. I was there.
I was there too. We were on the yard, just having a great time. Yeah,
Yes.
homecoming was incredible this year.
Well, let's jump right into Gather Me. And this is a tribute to the books that changed your life when you were growing up and what they meant to you. But before you discovered Sula, before you discovered Celie, Joe March
Yeah.
was a character in your life. Can you tell us why?
Yes. So the March Sisters felt like my own sisters. It was one of the first books I read where the protagonist was so headstrong, so determined, and was a writer. It was something that I knew in my spirit that I wanted to do. I was really attracted to the idea of making a life as a writer, but hadn't seen those reflections in my everyday life. You know, I would watch the news and I knew that if you were on television and you were reporting, you were an anchor. And I read the Washington Post. But when I was reading Little Women, there was something different about that. There was a sense of resilience and brightness and just like being so self-assured that I gravitated to and I absolutely loved. And I remember reading it in homeroom. We were assigned Little Women, but I would read it like outside of my dedicated hours. I would be like 7 a.m. on the school bus reading it. And my friends were like, "Are you still reading? Like, didn't we have to do that for homework?" And I was like, "No, I'm reading it just because I love this book. Like I enjoy it." So that was like my first inkling that the way I related to books or I held them close was different than some of my peers, that I was like really falling into it and loving the language in a different way. Like I just didn't see it as a homework assignment, you know? And Jo March was she was that girl. She really like made me understand that you didn't have to have a conventional life. You could do what you wanted to do. You didn't have to follow the path that everyone else did. And that definitely left a lasting impression for me.
And also, before you started thinking about representation and wanting to see characters, maybe whose gendered and racial experiences could impart something on you, you were very attracted to stories about childhood resilience.
Yes, yes. And at the time, I don't think I would have used the word resilience. I
Mm.
was just attracted to models of living, like ways of being in the world that didn't seem so clear to me from my own household. And so when I would read something like Hatchet or Little Women, and I would see like connections, like in Hatchet, I was like, oh, this protagonist, their parents are divorced too, and my parents are divorced. Like that's the thing. And with Jo March, as I mentioned, like she's a writer, and I want to be a writer. Like I would just see little things, and I would kind of like pull those ideas and put them in my pocket and hold on to them. And in some cases, I held on to them a little bit too long. Sometimes I would read things and I wasn't necessarily doing the close reading, or I didn't have the analysis to fully understand it yet. Like I feel that for sure when I was originally reading Toni Morrison, when I was first reading The Bluest Eye or Jazz, like I was reading it, but I wasn't fully comprehending things. So in each book, I really was just pulling out the things that like made me think or gave me a pause, and like I would revisit them later. So I reread books a lot, and I journaled a lot too. The way I was able to develop this book and the themes of it were like revisiting all my old journals and the scrapbooks I made when I was like in the 8th grade. Like all those memories were on those pages, were in the margins. And it was really interesting because I got to revisit my younger self and see how innocent or even how curious or how naive she was, and how I've grown from those first times of reading those books and how I've like developed my perspective over time.
Speaking of the bluest eye, I was very bookish like you were. I actually had a credit card to a bookstore when I
Oh my
was
goodness, that's amazing. Which one?
Crocs and Brentanos. It was a chain that no longer exists. And oh, I must have been about 11. And I asked my dad for, I was not, I was a library person at school and like the book fairs, but I really wanted to own books. And
Mhm.
I asked my dad for a bookstore credit card. And he said, no, like, what's wrong with you? And then he told his friends, I think to be like, can you believe what my daughter said? And then his friend said, man, if my daughter asked for a credit card to the bookstore, I would give it to her. So that's how I got it. And I
Awesome.
remember buying The Bluest Eye, and I was about 11 or 12, and I did not get it. And then I read it
Yep.
in high school. I still didn't get it. Then I read it in college. Maybe I got it then.
Right, right. I'm so glad you said that, because anytime I talk to someone and I'm like, how many times? Like that's my first question. I'm like, if you mention Beloved, Song of Solomon, The Bluest Eye, and you haven't read it more than once, have you really done the reading? Do you really understand? Have you been in conversation with other people about the book? Like you have to do the reading, the close reading. So yes, me and you, we would have been sitting next to each other on the school bus,
Yeah.
like having that conversation, maybe sharing that credit card.
You write in the book that books are the friends of my mind. What did you mean by that?
Well, first, that definitely was a ode to Toni Morrison because, again, I reread her work so many times. Beloved was such a pivotal read for me. It really made me understand the perspective of Black womanhood and agency and Black history. And the way that she writes is very much dedicated for Black people, by Black people. It's just like there's a beauty in her words, her sentences. Everything Morrison does is just so prolific. And when I read her work, I feel gathered, I feel held by it. And with the work that I am trying to do my hardest with Well Read Black Girl is the act of building community, of gathering people together, to allowing them to see the beauty of the work that we have at hand, whether it's a classic book like Morrison or a contemporary book that is coming out, the new works of Britt Bennett and, Angelou Flournoy, like whatever that lineage is, it is filled with just so much wisdom and insight. And there is this beauty of doing it together. We are doing all of it together. We're reading together. We are studying the work. We're studying craft. And it's a beautiful act. Reading for me is an act of witnessing and seeing how the word evolves with a person. The things that I read as a young person, they left an imprint on my heart, but they're now I'm also reading them to my son. And I have so many hopes and aspirations for him. Like I cannot wait for the first time he reads Ta-Nehisi Coates or reads James Baldwin. There is just like this passing of knowledge and love and just great care that is held in books, especially books written by people of color and Black women.
How old were you when you read Beloved for the first time?
Oh my goodness. I was fairly young. I read it like the end of high school, so my senior year, like 16, 17. And then I had to read it again at Howard in my African American Lit class. And that was like where it was like really broken up and open for me. And like reading it on Howard's campus is also just like a special thing. Being a Howard alumni is just like no other experience for a multitude of reasons, but to know that I was on the same ground that Toni Morrison was, like she taught there, she was a student there, like that also felt very special.
Well, I want to jump ahead since we're talking about Toni Morrison, although I was an adult when I read Beloved. And I was like, oh my God, I get it. I get it. Like
Yes.
it didn't, because I hadn't read her so young and it was difficult, but I loved it. But
Yeah.
Beloved was the first time that I felt I get this complicated text. But I was like a big adult.
Well, also, I almost wrote about it in the book, but remember, watching the film in '98 was also just like, oh my gosh, like seeing Oprah acting. Like, I remember us all gathering around watching it together. It's not like now where you can have watching on demand. You know what I mean? Like, we sat there and waited and had this moment with Danny. Like, it was just so beautiful seeing it from holding the book to seeing it on TV. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we're able to like witness this. And again, I was very young, so I didn't really fully understand the story, but I just saw the beauty. Like I recognized the beauty immediately.
Well, you don't write about watching Beloved, but you do write about meeting Toni Morrison.
Yes, yes. I had the amazing opportunity to meet her at a gala that I would have never in a million years was expected to be invited to. I was very, very nervous. But that moment again was an opportunity where I said yes. It was life-changing to be in the same room with her, to look her in the eye. She is all the things. She is very regal. She is just so generous, and just in terms of her aura and like how she acknowledges people. That she is this captivating, brilliant woman, and everyone wants to say hello, but she gives you like the eye contact. She gives you the nod. So me being in her presence was amazing. And I also had the opportunity to meet Tiare Jones that same evening, which was another moment that like changed things drastically because we ended up sharing a car ride. She was so encouraging, and she was the one that really bolstered my efforts to start the Well-Read Black Girl Festival. Like till this day, if I hadn't gotten that car with Tiare, I'm pretty sure like I would not have done the things I did. She was just like, you should do this now, do this in 3 months. I have your support, so to meet like these two big T's in my life, Toni Morrison and Tiare Jones on the same night, like I could not have imagined. I could not have planned it in any way. Like it was the universe, that was God, like saying like, you deserve to be here. And this community, these women who you admire greatly will support you in your efforts.
Well, before we get to the origin story of Well-Read Black Girl in that first festival and, what was happening in that time of your life. Let's go back to your family. Tell us a little bit about them and what you write in the book.
Yeah, so I am the daughter of Nigerian um, immigrants. I'm first generation. I was born in Northern Virginia. And this book really talks about that duality of being the child of people that had so many great hopes of coming here. My father went to Howard University. It's the reason why I went to Howard, as well as my brothers. It's he came here with just like very big dreams and came with my mother, and I was born here. And those dreams, some came to fruition, some were more challenging. And my book really tries to address that. And I use the anchor of books to really walk the reader through different experiences we had. As a family and the things that my father encountered, whether it was, racism or really trying to understand what the American dream really means to a family. And also the relationship I had with my two siblings and the love that we shared. I didn't grow up very wealthy, but that we had a lot of love in our household. And there were moments that we experienced mental health crises and how we dealt with that, in particular, how I dealt with that. A lot of people say reading isn't therapy, but I would disagree. I would say it offers you tools, it gives you coping mechanisms. And for someone who might not have access to a therapist right away or someone to talk to, I found myself talking to my books a whole lot. And it offered me great comfort. And I had teachers and other mentors and other people in my life that were able to just give me guidance. But the books were always there, and I always came back to that. So the story is about my family, about the books that we read together. My mom was a voracious reader, and she's the one who taught me how to read. I was reading at 3 years old. If you have the book now, you'll see a picture of my mom and I reading in the corner. I just thought it was so essential to have that because she really did plant the seed of loving words. And my mom has a beautiful accent. And I remember like listening to her as a young person and just getting the sound of her voice. Like even now, I tend to be very enthusiastic when I read to my 4-year-olds, but I feel like I'm always singing a song. Like I'm always kind of like carrying this like tune almost. And I get that from my mom because just how she like read to me as a young person and made it very exciting. And my dad was oh my gosh, like the best storyteller. Like, my mom would read from books, but my dad would just like make up stories, which I can't even, I feel like I'm more like my mom. Like I read, like I read everything to my son, but I can't necessarily just like look out the window and create a whole world of imagination. That was my dad. Like we would go to the car, we would go to the playground, and he would just like make things up. And I love that too. So I get that sense of curiosity and creativity from both of my parents in different ways. And I also wanted to like pay tribute to my son. I've mentioned him a couple of times. You might hear him in the background this evening, but he's 4 now. And I really wanted to kind of capture all of our family history, the good and the bad, and offer it as a gift to him. So when he's older, when it feels right, he will pick up this book and read it and understand me. He'll understand his uncles, his aunts, his like all the people that came before. And the fact that I'm Nigerian American, but I didn't grow up in Nigeria. So I tried to also like share the history of both my parents and what it means for them to come to this country and why they came. So all of that, it was really, oh man, it was just an investigation of self, to be quite frank, really like studying who I am, how I got here, and why it matters. I tried to write it all down in my memoir.
How vulnerable did you allow yourself to be? Because when people write memoirs, they're making choices of
Mm.
what to leave out, what to put in. And, when you go through hardship, like some of the ones that you mentioned, that's just very revealing, and it must be raw and joyful and painful. Well, I don't know how it feels, but I'm imagining it must be a lot of those emotions. So can you talk about the vulnerability and the choices that you made?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you read this book, you will really know who I am through and through, because I felt determined to tell everything that happened because I wanted to be free of it. There were times there was a particular moment in the relationship with my mother where she is suffering from a very severe depression. And I mean, for years, this happened within our family. I didn't understand it. I had a lot of shame around it. I was especially as a young person, I was just very embarrassed. And I felt, I mean, obviously I loved my mother. I understood that she was trying her best, but it was complicated. I still wanted her to be the mother that she was before the illness kind of like really took a hold of her. And now as an adult and now as a mother myself, I felt so much more compassion for my mother. I had a greater sense of understanding. I could see how difficult it was for her. And I had like, as I was writing everything down for the book, like it felt like something was unraveling in me. And I felt just like this sense of just like freedom. And I also knew how much the things that I had read that had helped me so deeply, that I was thinking, if I can be as honest as possible about these experiences in a way that also still respects my mom's identity and my family, hopefully someone else will like read this and like see my vulnerability and know that they also can get through it, know that like that's only one part of their story. Like the experience I had with my family, now I look back and I understand like, oh, that was very traumatic. But at the time, I didn't see it as traumatic. I just saw it as my life. And I was very determined to move forward with my life and still go to Howard and still pursue the dreams that I had. Like I didn't see the things that I encountered as an end. It just felt like something I had to overcome. And now that I have overcome it and I feel very confident and I'm like sitting here with you, I'm talking about it, I wrote a book, like again, I would have never imagined, but that's life. Like you just never know, things just like happen day to day experiences. Um, and if you are willing to be vulnerable enough and open enough, like life will surprise you. And I just thought that I don't really know what the outcome will be with this book. It's only, it's day, 4 about this book being out, but I just am praying that it helps people. It helps them see themselves clearly and to see that if I could go through something that's challenging, you can too, and just offer people hope and more possibility. So I did try my best. And I don't know. I just like, it's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid. Once you start doing it, like it's kind of all starts tumbling out. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to say this and now I'm going to do this. It feels very liberating. I will say, now people are asking me questions. Like the other day, someone came up to me and they were like, oh, how's Maurice doing? Which is my brother. And I immediately thought they knew my brother. I was like, oh, like he's great. Like, how do you know it? Like, I was like, how do you know him? And they were like, we read your book. And I was like, oh, that's different. Okay. Like now I'm trying to contend with that. They're like, oh, now people know and they will talk to me about this. It's like one thing for me to write it. Like now I have to engage with people and they know my brother, they know my son, and they know they know my AP English teacher. They know Mr. Burns. Hi, Mr. Burns. If you're watching, like all those things, that part feels different. And I don't think I fully thought that part out as I was writing.
Yeah. A couple of days ago, I was at the awards fundraiser for the Chicago Public Library Foundation, and they honored Ann Patchett and Christina Enriquez. There was a lot of talk about what libraries mean to people and what it is in a democracy.
Hmm.
And I mean, I feel those things too as a library goer, but I was fresh off of reading your book too. And I was thinking about the things that you said about libraries, especially in those tough times when you were younger and your, mom was busy working, not as present maybe as you would have liked her to be. Tell us what the library did for you and for Maurice.
Yes, yes. So for my brother and I, it offered a place of great comfort. We knew like once we walked through those doors, we were safe. And we were both very rambunctious and talkative children. And there was a contrast because in our house, my parents, they read us the stories, but there was also a sense of just like great obedience. Like we had to like listen a lot. And so sometimes the questions had to be dialed down a bit. And that was not the case in the library. I remember just like asking the librarian so many questions and them entertaining them all, like literally being like, oh, let's look that up. And this was before Google. They weren't Googling things. We were looking in encyclopedias. We were using like the card catalog. And just that like individual attention was just so meaningful. And it really sharpened my curiosity. And to this day, like I never feel embarrassed of like saying I don't know. Like if I don't know something, I'll be the first person to tell you because I want to like talk it out. I want to know the process. And I imagine Maurice is the same way too. He's a teacher, he's an educator. And so we like love questions, and I think that was very deliberate because of our experience in libraries. And then the other thing was like I don't know. I feel like libraries are the last space where it's like similar to the theater, like the last space where you can just like fully pay attention. Everywhere else there's like feels like there's like so many distractions and you're required to like buy something to get entry. So when you're in a storytelling space like a library or a theater where you like are sit in the rules of engagement are to be like quiet and still and just like look around and browse and ponder. It's almost like how you're on the computer browsing, but it's like in real life, just like this moment of just great joy that you can just kind of look at things. And I love the library, and being a young person and growing up in the environment, it nurtured me so much. And we would stay late. Like we would literally be at the library till like it closed until like my mom got off of work. So bless librarians, bless educators, and their willingness to just be there for young people. The teen room is the best room. I love visiting the teen room here in DC at MOK, the large branch library.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, like seeing teens, reading their stuff and using the VR equipment or whatever the case may be. I'm just like, oh, this is the best. You don't have to be at a mall. You can actually be at the library and learning something and just like being yourself. So the library is where it's at.
Speaking of your high school teacher, you were reading Maya Angelou, and this teacher poured so much into you, but you really took issue with how he interpreted Maya Angelou, and it was so different from what she meant to you. Can you tell us that story?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I went to schools in Arlington, Virginia. I went to public schools and I had a phenomenal experience. Took AP classes and AP history and English, all the things. And I was looking forward to reading. I had read Maya Angelou by myself, didn't fully understand. And I was really looking forward to reading it with my English teacher and discussing it in class because I definitely admired how he engaged with us as a class. He was someone that just challenged us, like constantly challenged us to like go deeper in the reading, to have debate, have like sharp discourse. And when we got to Maya Angelou, I felt like his words were slightly dismissive. They weren't what I was expecting. And I will admit, I am a very emotional reader. I'm intuitive. I like to feel like the words. It's almost similar to like a song. Like you ever hear like a really good song and you can like feel that chill. They feel like, you know what I mean? Like that like tingle you have with
Yeah.
music. Like I feel the same thing when I'm reading. Like you can like have that moment. And I felt that like bodily experience with so much of Maya Angelou's work that I couldn't even contend that another person wouldn't have a similar experience. Like someone would just be like, kind of it's good, but da 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 da. I was like, wait, what? Like I just had a full body experience and you're just thinking this is like a half-hearted shrug. So I was definitely disappointed at his analysis and how he talked about Maya Angelou's work to our class, especially a class full of young people in this advanced study class. So I took issue and I spoke to him, and what he came back with was sharpen your argument. Tell me why. Like, I know you feel it, but you have to like tell us. You need to be able to articulate this in a way that has like substance. And I sat with that and I came back and I talked to him some more, and then he pushed back some more, and then I talked to him some more again. And it became like this dialogue of me understanding what I was feeling and how to articulate that and how to write that in an essay and how to argue in a space where I didn't necessarily want to be confrontational, but I had to. It's because if I felt that this deeply, that I needed to be able to defend it that deeply, you know? So it was definitely a wonderful learning experience. And it makes me understand what young people might be going through now when they're trying to like formulate their ideas, build their perspective, and go out into the world and have a sense of agency. So that was definitely a beginning moment for me, and that continued to evolve as I grew older, especially when I got to college. When I got to Howard, that like continued to be sharpened as I met like different professors and had different peers that I talked to about things. That idea of just kind of like knowing who you are and what you stand for and what the word means. Because especially when it comes to like Black literature, it's not just a text. It's not, it's like scholarship, yes, but it's also tied to legacy. It's also tied to the oral tradition and like radical liberation. It's just like, it's so much more than just a word. And I knew that that was what I was feeling, but I wasn't able to articulate it then. But that experience like led to more.
I loved how you spoke up to him.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, gosh, like, and I had to, of course, I had to fact check everything. So I have so many group texts. I'm so good friends with my friends from high school. And I was like, do you guys remember that moment? And then we went on and we also started talking about other books that we had a little, little tense moment with, like The House on Mango Street and other things and Catcher in the Rye. Like we literally went through like all the books like we read in high school and how we felt about them. But yeah, my friends were like, yeah, we remember that moment. So it was pretty amusing that I had that gusto then.
What did Romeo and Juliet and Toni Morrison's jazz teach you about love?
Oh, yes. So I will, yes, I love Romeo and Juliet. And I watched that movie with Claire Danes and thought I was just gonna, I wanted to wear the outfits and have like the splashy hair. Like we watched that in one of our homeroom classes in high school. And so it made reading Shakespeare more exciting and felt more contemporary. But I was this idea of love and it being full of self-sacrifice and being fleeting and being full of like passion and ready to die for. Like I was so in the throes of like, yes, to be in love, you have to like throw yourself completely in. And I think a lot of young people can mistake this idea of love as, again, self-sacrifice. And with jazz, I love that book because of the language. I just love how moving and poetic it is. But I remember talking to a good friend of mine. I was telling her how much I love the love story of jazz. And she like looked at me like point blank. It was like, girl, that story is about murder. And I was just like, wait, what is it? And she's like, the first page, it's about someone dying. Like, where do you see that? And my rebuttal was like, what about the last page? Because I love there's a line where Morrison writes, I can't like quote it verbatim, but it's like that there's this moment where you look into their eyes, like this is it's just so beautiful. So I pick up my book and I turn to that page. I'm like, what about this? And she's like, yes, that is beautiful. That is Morrison. But this whole story is not just a love story. And she was right. And so I took it back, reread it, and was like, oh, I can see there's a pattern here from Romeo and Juliet to jazz. I am constantly looking to like sacrifice myself to like murder, and so I had to be more observant and look at how I was defining love, how Morrison was defining it, how Shakespeare was defining it, and come up with my own clear, cohesive definition that did not require me sacrificing myself. So it took a long time for me to come to that conclusion, but I'm very aware of it now. And so I thank both of them for offering me those like bits of loving myself and just that beginning. But I had to make my own definitions for sure. And I had to have a better understanding. And and it goes back to the close reading, right? Like sometimes you're still reading to see what your own biases and to see what you want to see. And you have to be in conversation with others and talk to others to see, kind of like clear it up a little bit and say like, okay, is this really what the author intended? Or am I just reading, am I seeing and reading what I want to read, you know?
And these reflections about love were not like, this isn't a lit review that you're doing. You're applying it to your own life and the relationships that you were in, which, no,
Mhm.
you did not murder someone
No,
or
no,
or
absolutely
try to
not.
do a suicide pact, but the self-sacrifice, like the patterns that you were showing up in the relationships
Yes.
when you were younger.
Yes, absolutely. Like I was definitely making choices and doing things that put myself last, that put, my needs, not creating boundaries and making excuses for when people were, treating me ill and not giving me the most care. So I was very eye-opening. And even as I wrote this, it was like, wow, like I had so much more compassion for my younger self and the decisions I made or what I thought was love. It's such an interesting thing to say, to write a book of this nature and be so revealing, but also like want to cater to your younger self and say like it's okay, like you made the choices with the information you had at the time and you did the best with what you had at the time, and now that you know better, you can do better, you can make better choices, you can be kinder and more generous to yourself and not mistake that self-indulgence as love.
You grew up in a religious community. Your mother's very religious, and church was a big part of your upbringing. But Nikki Giovanni gave you a different perspective on spirituality.
Oh yes, yes. I reading Giovanni was like just like reading the universe. It just felt more expansive and open. And to be frank, um, like everything and anything was possible. Like it did, there was more than one God. There were more stars in the sky. There was more ways to be. And you didn't have to be confined to anything. And I gravitated towards her candor, towards her energy, just how she wrote her poetry felt just like conversation and beauty and curiosity. It just was like bold, loud, and full of just truth, and compared to my religious household and my traditional African parents, where there were so many things that there were rules and it was very conservative. Reading her work broke me away from that and allowed me to say there was other models of living and other models of how to just move in the world. There wasn't just one religion, and I wasn't going to go to hell if I like read something else or did something else or even thought something else. I was so dedicated to what my parents taught me. It took me a while to even venture into this new space. And at first I was a little hesitant or even fearful because I thought like I could be punished or, wasn't the right direction to go in, that, if I made a move or made a decision that didn't align with my parents' beliefs, like it could be, devastating. So reading Nikki Giovanni really did just open my world and give me a better sense of the possibility and just like the breadth of the world. And also just like in ways that shaping my activism too. Like so much of her work had an urgency to it that you should do something now and within your capabilities, and anything that you did was a almost like a piece of a puzzle, like you were just like adding to yourself. And I also just remember reading into her reading Gemini and being like, what is this, like how are you so young and brilliant? Like I think before reading that, I thought that all the things that made you a person had to happen in old age. Like you had to be, and this is going to sound silly, like you had to be 30, like but when you're 16, Like when you're 16, and when you want to make your mark on the world, you think adulthood is like far, far away. Like you're not thinking it's 22 or 24, but she was doing those things. And then as I started studying like the civil rights movement and, seeing John Lewis and all these other people, like they were doing these things, and age was not the determining factor. It was just like when you felt that urge to do the work and you were moved to, and you were dedicated and consistent, no matter if you were 21 or 65, like all of it mattered, and all of it was like adding to this like collective power. So I really, and I still do love Nikki Giovanni, like seeing her now, and her, she's in her 80s. And when she reads a poem, we had the opportunity to invite her to the festival in 2020. And she like, I still visit the transcript of that conversation, because she just was talking about so many things. Like she went from like talking about Tupac to talking about squirrels to talking about like Kamala Harris. Like she talks about everything. And we were just like, wow. Like it just was so great. It just was so great that abundance and openness is something that's just in her spirit. And it invited me to do the same, to just like be open with my ideas and the possibilities of my life.
Tell us the origin story, because you write in the book that you're really telling the real, well, not the real, but the extended version of the origin story of Well-Read Black Girl.
Yes, yes. So in the book I share that, I kept I kept the shirt and not the man, because the shirt was gifted to me by my ex-partner, and it had the magical words "Well-Read Black Girl" on it. And it was a nickname that he had for me. It was one of many. And I wore that shirt in New York City. And, people would engage in conversation and would ask me about the things I was reading. And I would wear that shirt, and it was really like magic in the city. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and invited people to talk to me. At the time, I was pretty new to the city, didn't have that many friends just yet. And so I was so excited to be in community with others that loved books. You can take it. And so,
That's the 4-year-old, everyone.
yes, he wanted some chippies. And so, I wore this shirt and went out into the world, and something shifted. I decided to turn that shirt into a book club. And for the first 2 years, it was a very small, intimate book club. If anyone has my first anthology, which is entitled Well-Read Black Girl, if you go back to the acknowledgments part, you will see all the names of like the 20 women that came to the book club for 2 years straight. And we met in different authors' homes. We met over brunch. We met in the library. We just met and talked about books. And there was no expectation of this platform, this memoir. There was just a book club of very dedicated and loving Black women that were supporting the work of debut writers, writers like Naomi Jackson and Nicole Dennis Benn and Angela Flournoy and Britt Bennett, all these beautiful writers. At the time, that was their first book. And since then, they have continued to grow and evolve in their careers. They have just a beautiful time to be in Brooklyn. It was a beautiful time in books. And I played a very small role, but I am just like so honored that I was there and present, and I was able to curate and shepherd and like support that movement. And it all started with a yes. Naomi Jackson said yes and introduced me to another person, and then another person. At one point, we had Margot Jefferson in the room when her memoir came out. I mean, the Margot Jefferson. Before she came to our book club, she was like, ladies, you have 45 minutes because I'm going to a play after. And I was like, oh, done. We're going to make this quick. But she brought along her friend who was joining her at the play, and it was one of her high school friends. So we were talking about her memoir, Negroland, at the time, and her high school friend was chiming in and talking about a young Margot. It was like the best time. And you can't manufacture those moments. And I've had times where I've been able to connect with Jesmyn Ward and, Jacqueline Woodson, like these iconic, brilliant writers. And we're just in a room talking about books and just like really saying, like, we love your work. We love that your work is representative of just Black culture and literature and beauty, and however we can support, whether that is encouraging you online, going to the bookstore and, buying orders of all your books. Like, we just want to support you. So that is truly the origin story. It has evolved into now a nonprofit. We have youth programming. We have our festival. We have so many different moments that we try to just continue to advocate for diverse voices in literature.
How do you balance the virtual community with the in real life?
Oh, that's a great question. I wouldn't even say balance, because the algorithm does what the algorithm wants. Much earlier when I started, I felt like there was more traction, and I really felt like I could respond to every person when I was online because it was much smaller and it just was different. Even how you experience social media now, like the latest thing is TikTok and videos and reels. There's so many other new devices that go into what social media means and the curation of it. And I really do my best to like stick to the books. Like, I'm still recommending books. I'm still reading them. My editorial policy is, if I haven't read it, I'm most likely not going to share it online. It's not like a personal thing. I just really like it to be authentic to the things I've read so I can speak clearly to it. But I try to keep everything in harmony. So most of the reason why it's so essential for us to do the festival is because, or even host author events in a room or virtually like this, is because you want to look people in the eye. You want to be able to like connect with them on a personal level. So many people that are coming to the book club are also aspiring writers. So we talk about like what that means to share ideas, to share craft tips, to just encouragement, just to say, like, you can do this. I believe in you. I've been in a similar space. Like, it's all about keeping the momentum and not giving up. And I'm a person that believes like time is time. If you want to pursue something, the time is still going. So if you want to do the PhD or write the book or fill in the blank, big, beautiful goal in your mind, just do it, because time is still moving. And if you don't start, you're never going to get to it. So I'm always offering that advice of do the work, put in the time, put in the hard work, all the things that are great and meaningful take a lot of time and work, So this book, this memoir, it took 5 years to write. I went through the pregnancy, a pandemic, a breakup. I went through so much stuff. And so to sit here in this chair and have my 4-year-old run around in the background, I am very grateful to be in the position I am today, because I know I put in the work and the time to be here to celebrate. Also to the right of me are just like beautiful flowers and champagne and all the things that people have been celebrating this work. So I'm really, really proud. And like that online versus in person, I personally prefer to, again, look someone in the eye, hold their hand, give them a hug, and say that like we're in this together. And even this weekend last weekend I had the festival and I got an opportunity.
Yes, please tell us about the festival, because I saw the pictures on Instagram and was having FOMO.
Yes, the festival is just like a beautiful space. We closed with Edwidge Dandycat, who has a new book called We're Alone. If you are unfamiliar, please read her work. It is so, so beautiful. And she also worked very closely with Miss Morrison. And we had a chance to ask her about that experience. Like, what was it like working with Miss Morrison? They worked on several projects together, including the film Beloved. She was a writer and producer with that project. And so she just was telling us how generous she was and how she would call her at the time. If I'm recalling this correctly, Miss Morrison called her, invited her to Paris, and Miss Dandycat was like, "Oh no, I can't come." She just had her first daughter, and Miss Morrison called her again and was like, "What do you need to happen so you can come on this trip. Could you imagine like Toni Morrison and be like, okay, like we're going to figure this out with you, you know, and that generosity and that spirit is like, she has passed that on. Miss with Edwidge has come to DC. She helped me with the launch. She's helped me in other ways. And she just is such a beautiful mentor and puts that in practice of giving to the new generation. And so when people ask me questions or eager to connect, I do my best to be open and make myself available, because that is like a passing of opportunity and lineage. And we need that like kinship with one another. That I know that my entryway into literature has been very unconventional. I did not go to, I studied journalism at Howard, but I didn't do a traditional MFA. I didn't go to Iowa. Like I did it differently, but I hope my example shows that there's
Listen,
other
shout out to the
people.
journalists. Like we are part of the
Yes,
community too.
absolutely. We also had Nicole Hannah-Jones, Tanya Mosley, and Kennedy Ryan on a panel, and people were really surprised that I did that trio, especially because Kennedy Ryan is just a beautiful romance writer. Most people know her for that. Most people do not know she was a journalism major. She studied journalism at the same school as Nicole Hannah-Jones, and I'm just like, there's so many incredible journalists that are also writing books, that are doing the scholarship, that are doing the writing, and have such a keen way of interviewing, like yourself, like of just like inviting in conversation, putting it as part of the archive. It is so vital. It is so vital. And that's why I studied it, because I love the research process. I love editing and being behind the scenes of putting something together to make sure it's accessible, and there's a way that you can digest it. Not everyone is going to get information the same. Some people will read the book, some people listen to the podcast, some will read it, see it on a documentary, but everyone is deserving and needs the information. So how can we present that to them? And that's what journalists do every day. So thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you. We only have a couple more, well, maybe one more moment. Can you tell us what books you're looking forward to, or who are you reading? Who are you really excited by?
Oh, absolutely. So I have to do a plug for my own editing work. I acquired a book last year by the poet Yarsa Ward. It's called The Catch. It's her first debut into fiction. It's going to be with Live Right Norton. It's publishing next year. So I am encouraging people to look up Yarsa Ward and follow The Catch. It's a story. There's some magical realism. It's about two sisters who are searching for their mother. And the mother's identity is full of mystery and suspense. So I'm really excited for people to read that. I'm also I loved the book by Maggie Smith. Oh my goodness, why am I going blank on the name right now? I know. Oh my goodness. Oh, You Can Make This Place Beautiful. I loved Maggie Smith's book, You Can Make This Place Beautiful. She's coming out with a new book called Dear Writer that's really focuses on craft. I believe it comes out early next year. I got an advanced reading copy, so I'm reading that. I'm very, very interested in how writers craft their stories and how they, what is their inspiration when it comes to building craft and creativity. And on top of that, I'm always interested when poets do it, because I feel like poets have such a beautiful way of entering work. So when you think of Ta-Nehisi Coates, I obviously think of just his journalism and his preciseness, but I also always remember that he's a poet. And same thing with Clint Smith, how he does his scholarship with history, and then his storytelling has this very poetic energy. So I'm always very interested on how poets tell stories. So I'm very excited to read her new book, or have others read her new book, Dear Writer by Maggie Smith. And what else am I reading? Oh, and I just mentioned Edwidge Dandicat's latest essay collection, We're Alone. It is brilliant, and it talks about everything from climate change to her tributes to the writers that inspired her growing up, James Baldwin, Miss Morrison, all the things. So she even mentions her daughter. She writes about her family. It's really beautiful. So I'm also encouraging people to read that as well.
Great. Thank you for that.
Here I am. Natalie, thank you so much for a great interview. And Glory, I mean, I don't want to say that Natalie's job is ever easy, but it is a little bit putting the ball on the tee and letting you go, just take off. So thank you. And I mean that in the best way, just to be clear. You bring such great energy to a Friday night, especially a Friday night before an election when people might be feeling a little depleted, or a little anxious or a little worried. It was just such a balm. I found Anne-Marie and I we kept hopping up out of our chairs and saying, oh, it's just such a great night. It's such a great night. So thank you so much for bringing all of that to the screen. We really do appreciate it. I want to remind folks, both Natalie and Glory are going to spend another 55 minutes with us from 8:05 to 9 o'clock Central. At After Hours, FAN is giving away 100 copies of Glory's book to attendees. We'll be sorting all that out tomorrow. But for After Hours, come ask your own questions. Tell Glory what your favorite books are. Pick her brain a little bit more. Obviously, she has lots to offer, as does Natalie. I want to know what's on Natalie's nightstand as well. How do you get to come to After Hours? Make a donation in any meaningful dollar amount to you, and we will send you the link to come hang out and come join us. I want to make a quick program note. We're hosting Maggie Smith for her new book on April 9th in Fanland. So excited about that. And I'm thinking, Glory, we ought to talk a little bit about maybe you should interview Maggie Smith for us. It sounds like that would be a match made in heaven, obviously. So I'm going to post a question here. We were at 7:57. So there's a question that came in, a couple questions came in from Rashenda. I'd like to get to her. She says, for those of us that love books, we want to read the books you read. We want to read. Do you ever think of a must-read suggestion for resistant readers? That is, do you ever think, man, this book would be great for a resistant reader, someone who's more reluctant? Or would those be the same books that shaped you? So do you have something where somebody's just kind of turned off from reading or doesn't do a lot of reading?
Well, I'm a sucker for memoirs, so clearly I like my own, but not just mine, because I feel like when people hear reluctant readers hear like life stories that are surprising and full of like twists and turns that can pull people in. So that's usually my suggestion. And then trying to really see, what are their things that like light them up. So sometimes people suggest like graphic novels or have something like, I think it just really depends on the reader's temperament. And you want to try to do a little matchmaking in that, it's like almost like a blind date. You want to see like, oh, do you like this? You like this? Then you could meet here. So I don't have like a ready set list, but I try to, when people come with questions or book recommendations, I really try to like talk to the person and figure out what their personality is like and how to, connect the dots that way. And it also depends on age too. So if it's a younger reader versus like someone older.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, we got like 1 minute and we can talk a little bit more about this at After Hours, but I'm also thinking, do you do much talking to high school students?
Oh, yes. It's my favorite thing. So with my first anthology, I did, and this was again before the pandemic, I did a lot of school visits and hoping to do the same with this new book project. I have some time coming up in Miami and I'm going to be talking to some students there and even New Orleans. So each stop I have, I'm talking to students.
Okay, that's good because I would imagine you have a great energy and I'm sure the students would really find you engaging, and it could be, we have almost 70 plus schools that are part of our network. So I want to kind of nudge some of them, like, you got to reach out to Glory and set something up, because it seems like it would be such a nice fit. You would bring, there's such a nice authenticity to your enthusiasm. It's not fabric. I've done a lot of events and I'm a pretty good judge of that at this point. And you have a lot of authenticity to your enthusiasm. So
thank you. Just tell them I can't do a TikTok dance. I can't do any of those.
Yeah. No, we're thinking long term here. No, you need to do tour, rest, chill. So we're at 8 o'clock. We're going to close this down. Natalie, again, we'll see both of you in about 5 minutes. Take a quick break. Natalie, again, thank you for such a great conversation, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Thanks everybody for joining us on Friday night, and hope to see more of you in just a few minutes.